They're saying, this is who I am right now. If I jump off this platform, once I land in that net, I'm either going to be dead or I'm going to be different.
Oh.
Right? And why I fell in love with flying trapeze is that when you land in the net and you realize you're different, you say, I had no idea I was capable of that. And if that's true, what else am I not, aware that I'm capable of?
I am here today with Jonathon Conant of Airborne Arts. We're in the Diamante Valley of the South Pacific of Costa Rica on a ridgetop overlooking the ocean and many other beautiful things. And Jonathon created this place about 8 years ago. And besides your background, why did you come to Costa Rica to buy land and bring your trade here for this stage of your adventure?
Yeah. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's really fun to be able to have a talk with you. I want to start by saying that I actually started the business with my partner, Christine Van Loo. She's a world-class aerialist and becoming a world-class speaker, and very talented, smart, and loving person that helped with getting this place off the ground. So my background is in human development, and I've always been very interested in seeing what I could do to try to align our race into a more peaceful existence. And so even though I've done everything from drudgery work to flying people on the flying trapeze, it's always with a mind of how do I do what I do in a way that helps improve the quality of my life and thus improve the quality of other people's lives. So the basic answer to why trapeze, other than the fact that it was sort of fell into my life on its own in a way, but the basic answer as to why is because it's a tremendous system for addressing and upgrading people's quality of life. Why Costa Rica? My partner at the time and I looked actually all over the world, and it's kind of funny because we've both been coming to Costa Rica. We both loved Costa Rica and thought it was an awesome place to be. But at the time, we had been so many places together and seen so many awesome spaces where this might happen that we just felt like we wanted to go out and see what was the most exotic possibility. But over time, and through the grace of things just sort of falling out that way, the more we thought about the people here, and that's like the indigenous people, the Ticos, and how kind and welcoming they are, how accepting they are of new ideas, the fact that you can get water that's literally falling out of the sky and filtered by the mountain through your tap. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. The fact that you could fly here from LA in 5 hours, like I could fly here quicker than I could fly to my business in New York City from LA sometimes. And the fact that we both really loved it here and kind of understood what the culture was like. I think those were the driving forces of choosing Costa Rica. And when we first came to Costa Rica, we didn't really have a good sense of where we might put the rig in. I had some friends that I had brought down with my first flying rig here about 20 years ago. And we looked in those areas, which were more on the Nicoya Peninsula, but it turned out that most of that land was pretty sold out, and the land had gotten pretty dry, pretty unfertile. Mm-hmm. And two things happened that were kind of interesting, I guess. One was that we were sort of giving up. We had looked around in that area and we weren't really seeing what we wanted. And we just about to take off, and somebody said, "Oh, you should go look at the Diamante Valley. Like, it's really magic there." And so yeah, why not? We'll go take a look at it. And literally, like the day we drove in, we were just like, no way. Like, we thought Costa Rica was beautiful. We had no idea of how beautiful it could be, and we fell in love with the area. And then we found a piece of property that was unbelievable. It's at the base of the tallest waterfall in Costa Rica. And we made a deal with the guys to buy the piece of land, and we went home and got our money organized to come back and buy it. And when we got back, it turned out to be a bait and switch. So again, we were feeling frustrated and kind of threw our hands up in the air, and we're deciding, we'll just go home and try something else. And just before we were going to get in our car and drive back to the airport, we saw a listing that was very suspiciously like the other listing we had seen that was a bait and switch. And we were like, yeah, but it's a different number, so let's go take a look. And so we came up to this piece of property, and in fact, it did turn out to be a bait and switch. It was another piece of property behind this property, and we very quickly were like, yeah, we're not interested. And as soon as we said we weren't interested and we're about to leave, the guy who was really needing to sell some property and make some money, said, come take a look at this other house I'm building. And so we walked over, and sure enough, like, the place was spectacular. It had plenty of space and a gorgeous view of the tallest waterfall in Costa Rica.
Wow.
A gorgeous view of the ocean and a gorgeous view of the valley, perfect breezes. So kind of a no-brainer. So
no, you got a nice
place in
perch
cash
here.
that day. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah. And since when you got the place, you said the house that we're in now, which is just magical, but you said it was more of just kind of a straightforward boxy shell of a house that you originally had?
Yeah, so the guy who sold us the property had been working on the house and had sort of taken it to a point and then ran out of money, and so it was basically a shell. And we came in and stripped everything that he had in the house out and fumigated the place and made it clean. And then I have a lot of friends who are artists from around the world who I've sort of don't collect art, but I collect artists. And very fortunate. And I just called upon them and said, hey, come and, here's a budget and do your thing. And I think there's probably 10 artists represented in the house, and we just let them go. I mean, the concept was we want elegant Hobbit, basically. Okay. And that's pretty much what we got.
It's got that vibe, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And the rest of the land here, was it pretty open like this and you've been planting it, or did you have to make some space for what you wanted to do?
You're exactly correct. So when we came, the area out here out the front door was a driveway, and there wasn't a pool or a deck or anything. And so I wanted this to be like a really natural feeling entrance. And so we spent 2 years searching out rocks and rivers, big flat rocks, and most of averaging about 200 or 300 pounds, and walking them down the rivers as a team and bringing up and placing them here in the walkway. And that's why this is all natural rock. Same with the stairways. There weren't really any plants on the property at the time. The old owner wanted it bare and had it very, very bare. And over the years, we've been planting, and we've sort of reached a point now where there's enough, fruit to supply the house and several neighbors. And we're just at a point where I can feed myself and maybe 1 or 2 other people with vegetation. And then in the next few years, it'll be pretty much enough of everything to feed like a family here. So that when we have, guests staying, we take them around and we show them the different herbs and vegetables and fruits that are growing, which are quite unique really to this area. And I think that's a good experience for people to see how it can happen without like having to really super focus on making it happen. You plant it, you make sure it plants in a place that it is happy, and then you just kind of let it do its thing.
Yeah, it's a nice thing about the tropics here. We have so many perennial plants that you can just put in the ground and count on for annual food without much maintenance. Yeah, that's great. And so you've designed the place with some food in mind. Obviously, the aerial rig is the kind of center piece of the project. Is there anything else? I know you talked to me earlier about the little experiences you offer people. Now, before we go into that, you host people, you host groups, large groups. You said you can host how many people here at a time?
So our comfort zone is groups between 8 and 15, but we have and quite often host groups up to 25 people.
Okay. Yeah. So that's wow. When you start getting over 18, that's a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That's kind of pushing it to the edge of the sweet spot, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And hosting people, I've hosted people in a wide variety of settings at my place, being, a chef at other places, and so on. I've helped with a lot of events. So I understand the dynamic of having a new group coming in again and again and again and again. And then in between those groups, you're still doing classes for like folks in the neighborhood,
That's
right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you at this point, you seem like you're kind of a solopreneur with this. Do you have any active partners that are really helping you keep on top of the grind with it?
Well, there's definitely a team in place. So my ex-partner and I still works and helps me out with things. She handles some of the accounting and sort of helping me keep track of making sure that all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And then we have an accounting team, which consists of 2 people that help us design our spreadsheets, that help us track information as people come and go, and then an accountant. And then in each aspect of the team, There are people who sort of specialize. We have our aerial coaches, we have our flying trapeze coaches. So we definitely have a lot of help. I'm definitely, leading the team,
The ringleader.
but I'm in no way am I alone.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And so what are some of the things you've learned over the years here in hosting people where you found yourself coming into your edge or getting pushed over your edge that you've kind of implemented as safeguards to that so that you can keep your kind of your momentum, but also your peace through it all?
Right.
How do you keep
That's
that
a
balance?
really good question. So I have some advantages and some disadvantages, and I'll put those out first. Like probably my biggest advantage is that because of the company I had in the US, which is the same kind of thing, I already had a name in the world that I was trying to draw on initially. So I had a base of clientele that I was pretty sure was going to come down. And then secondly, and the cool thing about that is that unlike going to a retreat center where you don't know the person who owns the retreat center, I have a name in my business, and I'm kind of older now. I'm like the old coach. So instead of going to like a retreat center that's like a hotel, you're kind of going to your coach's house. And that's a little bit of a different vibe, because when I set up retreats with people, they very quickly sort of understand, like, I'm a master in my field, right? And you can't just come here and expect to be treated like you're at a hotel. Like, you're actually staying at someone's house who's been in the field you're interested in for many, many years. And there's a respect that comes along with that. So when people show up, instead of sort of having an attitude of like, when's my room going to be ready? It's more like, wow, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to like be at your place. And that has helped me out a lot. And it's important for me because emotionally, like, I don't feel like I am a hotel owner at any level. I feel like I'm someone who provides a very particular kind of experience. And while I don't need to market that per se, it is important to me that people understand that there's a lot of love and investment in this job, in this business, and that when they come, it's a privilege to be here. Even though they're paying for it, it's still a privilege, because you could, if you have $1,500 to $2,500, you could go anywhere with that money. But where are you going to go where somebody really is going way out of their way to make sure that you have a deep experience for that money? That you're not just getting a few meals a day, that you're not just getting a clean room, but that you're going to walk out of here feeling loved, feeling full. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's kind of like a premise for how I do business, which helps me a lot. So if you were to ask me, like, what is one of the foundational concepts of how I do business, I would say do business in a way that garners respect. Make sure that you are feeling respected by everyone who passes on your property, because you cannot separate emotionally from your investment. You can look at your place and say, oh, I've got a hotel. I shouldn't feel upset if somebody comes in and trashes the room. By the same token, if you set up the vibe and the story correctly, people should feel really good about having had the opportunity. And it's as simple as like adding a bit of, like, just showing them that you're providing something special, adding a bit of artism, making sure that they feel like they understand why you do business the way you do before they get to you. And then when they get here, welcoming them in a way that makes them feel like, oh, I'm not just like walking into a random business. Like, this is somebody's project of love. And I think that fills everybody's cup up much, much better.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you're doing to kind of keep your experience grounded, so that you're not being pulled off in all of these distractive directions. You're creating an environment so that when people arrive, they know there's somewhere where there's a program going on, mm-hmm. They've signed up for it, and they're going to be taken care of. And more than that, they're in somebody's home. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of the places that I visit, a lot of the projects, these kind of homestead, eco-lodge, mm-hmm. transformation stations, mm-hmm. they are, a lot of times just for whatever economic or space or just desire reasons, they're living within the groups that they're hosting. Yeah. And that, like you said, it really it's a very different experience than going to like just an eco lodge or a hotel where you're just going to have your accommodation and your services.
Yeah.
And so you do a variety of special things to keep people aware of that. And I'd love to go deeper into that. But first, tell me a little bit more about, is there anything that you are doing now that's different than you were doing when you started? I know you started with lots of experience hosting these types of workshops in your other businesses. Here, is this your first time having like a rural residential kind of retreat center type environment, or have your other business ventures been of that same?
That's a great question. I have had businesses that were rural, but never like the retreat center model. In fact, my other businesses, or the major business, Trapeze School New York, that was all city-based. Obviously, New York City, you can't get to be more city-based than that. So, and that is definitely a different kind of environment. I think there are a lot of things that we're doing differently. Obviously, over the years, you have to modify or you go under. A couple of the things are, and most of it has to do with also write emails, and we sort of give each piece of information where we think it makes sense in the timeline of their getting used to the idea of coming. And then we have a big one sort of in the middle and a big one at the end that gives a ton of detail about what they have to expect.
Okay, well, let's dip into that a little bit, because I know I've learned in my recent adventures with this podcast and working with more of the online tools that email communication is actually super valuable and underused by really most businesses across the board around the planet. But especially in these very unique situations, it makes tons of sense. Like, yeah, of course we need to be letting people know. And we have a little, disclaimer on our website and send a little email out. But you're saying you have a series of emails that you send people. Can you describe that for some people that don't really necessarily use their email list or have much of an active communication? What's like a kind of a framework you use or have set up to communicate with people before they arrive to your event?
Sure. So, and it's kind of a two-part campaign, because, as you know, like, no one wants to read anything. Like, who has time to read anything other than what they want to be spending their time reading? So part of your campaign is to develop material that is intriguing, because you want to draw people into your story. And, the story of your business is probably the most important thing. And your emails are the first thing that start to tell your story. Like, why should you spend your money with us? Why should you come here? Do you do that through humor? Do you do that through storytelling? How do you do that? And develop a story that is unique, to who you are and really captures what you want them to know. And then the second thing is disseminating that information in a way that flows for them, because the first story is going to be imposing, right? I'm really busy. I have 50 emails to read today, right? So that first story has got to be really intriguing. It's not like you always have to tell a story, but whatever those first pieces are, they have to be intriguing. So when the next email shows up, they're like, here's that email. I'm kind of into reading that. And then you're making space for you in their life, right? By whatever means, you're using humor, whatever it is. And then when you feel like you've put out enough information, you got to go back and make sure that people are reading this stuff, because most people are just going to put it off, and then they're going to show up and say, "Oh, you never told me that." No, actually, we did in the email, and then it's a fight. You avoid that conflict, right? You're never going to win that conflict. So we start saying to the teachers, like, I want you to check off that each person knows this information, A, B, C, D, E, and we keep a spreadsheet to confirm what people know and what they don't know. And then we sort of back that up by saying, we want to know your flights in, we want to know your flights out, we want to know how you're getting down here, we want to know if you have any allergies, we want to know what medications you are. And through that, we're showing them, you're coming to a place where we're going to know you deeply. We're going to know how to take care of you, we're going to know what's important to you, we're going to know what your preferences are, we're going to know what bothers you, and we're going to know what your goals are. And I think that it's through developing this kind of a relationship where it's like, oh, I'm not just going somewhere where they're taking my money and giving me sort of like a pat experience. They're actually thinking about me. And when I show up, I know your name, and I have memorized your allergies, and I've memorized your food preferences, And I'll be like, hey, oh yeah, man, it's so good to see you. Okay, I just wanted you to know, I remember, like, you're allergic to peanuts. We've talked to the chefs. Her name is Tatiana. If you have any questions, make sure you speak with her. But, this is where peanuts will show up in the meals, and we'll remind you to avoid them in these ways. So I think it's through that kind of, like, I don't know, I guess it really comes down to, like, despite how painful it can be sometimes, caring for each client as if they're family.
Yeah.
And just making sure they feel cared for.
Yeah. No, what you described right there, I really feel like thinking about arriving under those circumstances versus arriving under most circumstances where there really is no connection, there's no relationship built, there's just a transaction. I bought your thing, I showed up, okay, now we're going to figure it out. That level of attention, it makes just amazing first impressions. So in this series of getting to know them before they arrive, but how many emails do they receive?
Probably no more than 5.
Okay.
But some of it's emails, more of it is confirmations from the teacher. So we expect the coaches to also be developing that same kind of relationship. So some of it we'll do, and some of it we'll ask the coaches to do. And we have a spreadsheet for tracking, did this happen, did this happen, did this happen?
And you have some of these emails set up in like an automation program of some sort? Or somebody's just in charge
crazily,
of
we write
manually
almost
sending them?
everyone, separately, because
my goodness.
so far, like, each one has been so unique in its way. But yeah, some of it is pretty standard language. So I have some cut and paste stuff, but a lot, I don't mind taking the time to do stuff.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've already begun to curate a very personal, intimate relationship with them before they even arrive, and then they get here. And, there's the superficial, reason of coming of, oh my gosh, the flying trapezes is brilliant, whether they've done it before and they just really want to train, or it's a unique, novel experience that they just want to, like, hey, let's go do that, right? They get caught by an ad or something, or a word of mouth recommendation. But beyond the like big upfront draw, and the benefits of it, I mean, definitely, I can think of benefits of the actual exercise being, good for not only physical wellness, but I know this morning when you had me up there was this very rich experience of present moment, and everything's moving so fast, and a single blink of thought can miss your timing, right? Timing's everything. So being able to stay present enough to listen to your instructions and not be in one's head, it really felt like I was like, I had to really remind myself when I was about to jump, like, it's game time, all focus now, and that's training. There's a practice there. And I definitely felt immediately that extra value that comes with the experience. But then you were talking about, you mentioned something really interesting. I want you to talk a little bit more about it, is the value, and this I think would pertain to other movement-based retreats. And you're talking about something that happens in the body-mind connection when one is focused and really present with their body and intentional with their postures in all moments, versus maybe a normal, less aware state of being. So you mentioned that's kind of part of your program. So share a little bit more about your philosophy and experience with that.
Sure. Well, this kind of comes back to the concept that, I want to make sure that my gift to people through their experience here is multi-leveled, because there's their expectation that they come in, there's the expectation I have of myself, there's what's possible through, quote unquote magic, and then there's, experience teaching, and all these things can be working together to certain goals. And most people come in with the goal of getting better at the thing, right? But if you sit down and you really ask yourself the question, like, why do I want to be better at the thing? Well, maybe I want to feel better about myself. Maybe I want to feel more connected to my community. Maybe I want to feel more connected to, quote unquote, God. And so because I know this in my background on human development, I sort of boil everything down to if there was one gift I could give through everything that I do, what would it be? And my answer is connect people to flow. Because when you feel that you're in flow, you feel like you belong on the planet, you feel worthy, you feel generous and compassionate. All these things that, are the ideals of humanity can be attained through finding flow, being present and finding flow. And so when I'm teaching on the trapeze, even if I'm giving a very truncated introduction like you got today, that's always in the back of my mind. And of course, I'm looking at students and how they learn, and some people have more sovereignty, more independence, and some people need a lot of attention and need a lot of hand-holding through the process. But the goal is always flow, because if they can even start to sense what it feels like to have a little bit of flow or a little bit more presence in their life, that will ignite their natural desire to seek more of that.
Yes.
And I have an old saying, which is that if you've never been loved, you don't know the truth of love. Like you just can't understand what it even feels like to be loved. So you can't be expected to behave in a loving way. And it's kind of the same way with flow. Because if you haven't been put in an environment where you're encouraged to get into that state, you don't even know what you're missing. And when people talk about their lives feeling two-dimensional, most of us are smart enough to say, well, what's missing from a two-dimensional life? Well, a lot of times it's being loved or feeling connected or feeling a part of or feeling, like the universe is on your side or whatever it is. That's what kind of stretches life into 3 dimensions. And so that's the essence of what we're trying to accomplish. And all of the details of if you're getting better or not become very secondary to that process.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I love it. And this is, this comes into just mindfulness practice, and applying it to all things, right? And so I'm thinking about this concept, and I'm curious if we can explore, because there's a command with being on the trapeze that it's so unique, and it's just like when you're in your head, you realize that was the wrong place to be. Mm-hmm. I need to really let go, be in the flow, aware, listen, move, be with the rhythm. So that commands it. But obviously we know that there's a lot of ways to bring mindfulness to what people are doing. And I can imagine that being on the trapeze, while it does enhance the likelihood of attaining that point of reference of flow state, I can imagine that it's very easy to have a different type of instruction that just keeps you in your head and you're just fumbling longer. And it seems like you have a little bit more of an art of bringing people to that point of reference quicker than they would on their own. And I'm guessing that you would be able to do that not on the trapeze, whether you were giving a tour of the gardens, are opportunities to bring people to that flow state. Is there anything that you do or have designed into your instruction style that helps bring people to that point of reference earlier than later? Yeah,
that's a good question. So it's interesting because we were talking a little bit before we got on air about what kind of decisions do you make to see your business thrive and prosper? And one of the things that I said was location. And most people, when you tell them location, they think, oh, is it accessible? And you might think, oh, is there a good view? But one thing that is overlooked is that when you nail the location, you're dialing in a frequency for people when they show up, because they're like, oh, this makes sense. And that's already step one. And this kind of a place, and most of the businesses I've built, I always look for a location that's not only like, oh, this is the right vibration, but holy crap, this is beautiful. Already that starts a sense of magic and starts to shift their energy and their thinking. I don't have to do anything. You see that waterfall and you're like, okay, something's going on here. How did this happen? That starts the magical thinking. And I use the word magic loosely, but there's a concept that I work with is that confusion always precedes enlightenment. And my job is to send you into confusion so that I can shake off the things that are holding you to your current set of processing systems and instill new processing systems. Now, who am I to say what processing systems that you should or shouldn't have? And the good news is that I don't. I actually put them in front of you, and your own system decides, yeah, that's right or that's wrong. And you either take it in or you don't. So when you say something like, well, some stuff is more heady and some stuff is more experiential, I might say, well, it really depends on the person's resources. Because if they come with a lot of muscular understanding of sports, then I can access that resource to get them further down the line than I would maybe their intellect. But if they come with a lot of intellectual power, and their intellectual power is more refined than their muscular memory of sports, well, that's where I'm going to go first, because that's what they got going for them. So I'm building on their foundation of knowledge already. And that once they see me do that without any conversation about it, people go, oh, they get it at a kind of a basic level, like, this guy knows how to teach me. But they never maybe say that out loud, but they feel it because they see themselves making progress and they feel good about it. And that's the connection, right? And then when the moment comes, you can give talks about the things that might be lacking. Like, if you want to see this progress forward, here, you're going to need to put more of your attention. Like, you already have this going for you and you're killing it with this. If you want to see this move forward, you are going to have to do this. And so instead of it being a judgment about, well, I'm not very sporty. Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's not that you're not sporty. It's just that your resources happen to be in this area. And if this is what you want to pursue and accomplish, then you have to also invest some energy into these other areas, right? So that's kind of how we do that.
So you find their strengths to give them, to help them feel comfortable in their point of reference, but then it seems like you're also looking for their weaknesses and using those as some kind of like pattern interrupt, where you're kind of giving them something like to focus on something unique as a way of, seems like maybe after they're grounded, you feed that grounded nature, and then you're giving them something else to do that switches them out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the reason I chose trapeze in the first place was that it has already a natural system without the facilitation, which is that it puts you in an environment where you have to question whether you're going to live or not. Like, it doesn't matter if you're intellectually smart enough to convince yourself, well, I'm wearing a safety belt and there's a net there, so I'm probably going to be okay. It doesn't matter. Like, anybody who's standing on that platform for the first time, they're kind of shitting themselves, right? And they're saying, this is who I am right now. If I jump off this platform, once I land in that net, I'm either going to be dead or I'm going to be different. Oh. Right? And why I fell in love with flying trapeze is that when you land in the net and you realize you're different, you say, I had no idea I was capable of that. And if that's true, what else am I not, aware that I'm capable of?
Yeah.
And that's restarting the natural process of curiosity of what you're able, because most people, by the time they're like 15 or 16, have decided what they're capable of, right? Once that shuts down, man, compassion is not far behind, right? Interest is not far behind, like depression is not far behind. But if you can reignite people's sense of what they might be capable of, and it's very natural that when that's reignited, the first thing that people want to do is like, hey, look what I discovered I'm capable of. Well, of course you're capable of that. That's the fire. Once you start that fire, it's on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. And then it's just a matter of cultivating that with fan
and
the flame.
And making mistakes.
And
shit going horribly wrong.
So in the course of people being here and getting that experience of learning that they're capable of more than they thought, and getting a point of reference for flow state, which is super valuable, and great thing to be able to carry forward in life. You're saying that their experiences, there's more that people are experiencing here than they're aware of. You've interwoven certain concepts and experiences into their stay that are also part of kind of your therapeutic guidance, perhaps. And so share some of those little touches that you've sprinkled into your program that make a difference.
So one thing about my background, which will lead to a conclusion that I'll share with you, is that I have worked with schizophrenics and battered women and abandoned children. And doing that kind of frontline work, you get a really close look at how people enter the therapeutic environment. And one thing I think most therapists learn is that therapeutic relationships are absolutely critical because you just can't depend on your friends and your family for everything. That being said, the expectations when someone enters a therapeutic relationship are such that you almost expect a whole new line of defense and resistance to the thing that you're doing. Like the minute you meet somebody and they say they're a psychologist, people's, hackles go up. Or if you say, I think you need therapy, there's just a lot of like not good press around that. So I think it's absolutely important to hold your concept of what is therapeutic in sort of a nebulous area where you can activate with it and take action on it and have systems that are developed around it without ever having it so concrete that you get fooled into thinking you're doing more or better than you can, because it's really up to the individual to take their own step forward, right? And also, we don't talk about it. Like, it's Fight Club, we don't talk about Fight Club, right? It's therapy, we don't talk about therapy, because I don't want to deal with the resistance that people will bring if I call it therapy. But by that same token, I can't have an expectation of a therapeutic outcome. I can only try to find systems that I know generally consistently deliver a particular kind of outcome and do my best to deliver them to other people in the most compassionate, thoughtful facilitation I can. Because once I start thinking I'm doing something, I'm making you better, I'm giving you an opportunity, it breaks down. But if I build an environment where systems that I have seen have worked in the past, for example, you enter the kitchen, you feel welcomed by this beautiful sun. You may not even be aware of it, but the look on the sun's face, man, just makes you feel like awesome.
Right away.
And there's a poem that goes around the top of the room that most people don't notice until their third or fourth day here, but it's a Rumi poem about staying present and staying awake. And just there are all these pieces that I've put in that you may or you may not notice, but as a general rule, I have seen them have a particular kind of influence on people. And if that person is ready for that piece of work or ready for that movement, that thing will influence them to that movement. And if they're not, that's okay, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're using aesthetics, you're using imagery, words. Tell me more. What other little things are you weaving? What other things are people subliminally finding that are enhancing their experience?
Well, it's funny because we use like these words that are kind of a little crunchy granola, but milieu to me is very important. Like when you walk into a space, not only how clean it is, but how it's clean has a lot to do with how people experience that space. And I notice for myself when I walk into a space can be cluttered, but if I feel like my awareness can kind of reach out into all parts of the room
without feeling icky,
I start to feel safer. And the safer I feel, the more open to ideas I feel, the more energy I'm bringing, the more presence I'm bringing. If I can get 10 people feeling like that, then it's on, right? We just had a retreat here recently where we had, 5 people who didn't know each other. And they all came into the space and they all had a very similar reaction to the space and the environment and the way that we sat down and talked, and that I speak honestly, and I'm not trying to condition them to think that it's a particular thing. I'm just conditioning them to be ready to take whatever it is on. And I speak very honestly and I swear a lot. And so there's no pretense that I'm trying to make it pretty. And I think that in this particular case, with their own stuff and bringing in their own like vibes, like they really sparked it off together and they bonded super tight. And by day 3, they were talking about like really powerful concepts. And I'm like, I left the room because I don't know. This thing is taking care of itself now. I don't need to manage that anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah. So it's milieu. It's thinking about what makes people feel like they're in a special place, because if you go and you spend $1,500 to $2,500 and you feel like the place isn't quality, that's hard. Like you feel like you didn't quite get your money's worth. So how do you start a business and provide things that are extremely expensive generally when your price points aren't super, super high? Because like high-end hotels are, $4,000 to $7,000, $8,000 for a week or whatever. We're not charging that kind of money. So each thing that I do, I try to design it in a way that it feels special. Okay. And so that when they see it, they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Like I've got hammocks strung all over the place. And when people walk in, one of the first things they say is, look at all the hammocks. Because like all year long, they're just like, I would love to lay in a hammock. Imagine showing up here and there's one hammock. And 10 people who all year long have been like, God, I would love to be in a hammock. No,
There's been to those places,
right? There's as many hammocks as you need so that every one of you can get into a hammock, or lay around next to a hammock with somebody. These kinds of things have a deep effect on people and feeling like they're getting something more.
It's so true. No, I love the hammock touch. And that's like, it's the thing. It's like you come to the tropics and you're like, of course there's a bunch of hammocks. But then when there's not, like I was gone for a few years in the States and I came back. When I got back to the farm, there was like the main common area had a hammock. I was like, huh? Really?
Yep.
Let's go buy some hammocks because
they're not that expensive. Really.
That person's in a hammock and I'm the owner and I want to lay in a hammock and I'm not going to kick the person out. Like this is definitely a sign that we need hammocks. People, that's like one of those little touches, like to be able to just kick back is such an exquisite gift. And it's those moments of reflection when they get to just put themselves down and rest and look at the treetops and the birds and stop long enough to recognize where they are without having to like go crawl into the house somewhere on a couch or a bed and they can just relax outside. Hammock culture is just
it's a big deal that people don't get exposed to. It's not more
of a thing in other countries.
And then I'd say a couple more things. Like one is the story. So for example, I really couldn't afford putting in like a $25,000 pool. And I really didn't think it was necessary because there's a lot of water features in the area. And then it kind of occurred to me, well, I want to put in a cool looking pool. And I put in a kind of cool looking pool that feels very natural and it makes sense with the space because you can get in the pool and look at the waterfall. And at night, there's a fireplace as part of the pool. So we light these fires and you're in the pool and there's a fire and that's really cool. And everybody sits around in chairs and plays music. It's just cool. But you also want to think about the story of what you have and how to resource the other things that are around. So when people show up here and they're like, oh, that pool is so cool. And I'll be like, yeah, but you just wait because I'm going to take you to this awesome river. And then I'm going to take you to the like top of this waterfall. And we're going to lay at the edge of the waterfall and the water's going to flow over us as it falls down this, 300-foot fall. So you use the thing that they're interested in to build your story of why their experience is going to be beyond what they ever imagined. And that's really cool.
So they're here and they're not even at the waterfall and they're already excited about the waterfall.
Psyched. They're already super psyched. And they're already, the first day, they're already thinking ka-ching, 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 and their idea about the value they've gotten for their money is already satisfied and now they can relax. Because what do you do when you first get to a hotel? You're like, how nice is the bed? How nice is the food? How nice was the person at the thing? Right? So, and if you're aware of that and that happens within you, how do you address that with a client when they show up so that you're answering that question before they even know they're asking it, really is what it is. And then the last thing I would say is there are a lot of experiences that you can give people that they don't even think that they want, because they haven't had that experience in their life. And one thing that I learned as a kid, because I was not a very helpful kid when I was young. And then some things happened that sort of opened my eyes to like why it's cool to be helpful to people. And after that, like, for example, I would never help with dishes when I was a little kid, right? And when I got older and started seeing the value in doing that, there was a day when I was standing at the sink with my aunt, and we both had our hands in the warm soapy water and we're talking about our lives and experiences. And I just kind of realized, whoa, like this is a kind of bonding I never would have had I not come to the conclusion that being helpful was a good thing, right? And so instead of us like taking up everybody's dishes at the end of the night, we have everybody wash their own dishes. And on the surface, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, I gotta wash a dish. But inevitably, people through the process of helping and being together, accomplishing things together, as simple as that, and the sensuality of the experience, is that bonding is like essential. And so you're always looking at how people interact on your property, and not, you think about where do they need to be separated from each other, where do they need to feel a sense of autonomy, and where can we give them opportunities to be a community that are limited, that don't force them to like have to face all their stress about it, but give them a moment of that to take home with them. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things I think about.
Okay, hey, let's touch on that again. So washing their dishes together and having that, give me another thing or two that you do to help bring community, intentionally bring community into the program.
Okay. Well, one thing that, you're likely to experience if you come to Airborne Arts is that you're going to be sleeping in a dormitory. And usually when I go to a hotel, especially if I spend as much as I spend coming here, I want my own space. But the truth is, and I think this is true for a lot of people, that what we're most comfortable with and what we think we want or need are oftentimes very different things. And I think that when we're kids and we get the opportunity to go to camp, and even though we have to listen to the kid next door snoring or somebody's farting or whatever's happening that's kind of annoying, there's something that you get about going to sleep with people in the room and people talking and everybody falling asleep while they're talking. There's something that you get about waking up in the middle of the night and hearing other people breathing, or like noticing someone else is awake and reading, and that you're there with them, or waking up in the morning and having everybody start talking about the day. There's something about that experience that I think is essential. And if there's any way that I can get people to get comfortable with being in a dorm, that's where I want them to be. Now, I do have private spaces, and sometimes people come and they'll start in a dorm and they're like, I just can't sleep, and then we'll move them into a private space. Of course, we're going to do our best, but if there's any way I can give the people that experience, I think it's absolutely essential for us feeling a sense of belonging, to sleep in the same room with other people. It's just such a special experience.
I'm really glad you shared that. That's a unique take on the dorm experience. Often it's seen as like the budget, if I have to kind of experience. But no, that's a really deep insight that it does. It fosters, besides maybe a sense of community and getting to know each other well. But I think it really is valuable for people, again, those pattern interrupts. If they're not used to being among other people, we wake up every day with very similar morning routines or thought patterns, but all of a sudden when there's other influences, it triggers us into different patterns, different thought processes, different examinations of the day. You might see somebody that's really just woke up with a brilliant vibe. They're just happy to be awake, and then all of a sudden it gets to infect everybody.
Yeah.
And I love
That's
that
cool.
the dorm experience. Yeah, it is. It's rich. It's valuable, and it's worth having for those that are. It's a unique experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I've taken up a bunch of your morning here already, and I guess we're into the afternoon already. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Is there anything you want to say to listeners that might be wanting to buy land and build a retreat center and do something special, practice their trade and invite other people in for experiences? Any words of advice or encouragement or otherwise?
I guess the main thing I would say is, we get excited about our ideas, and it's important to defend a good idea. You have to defend a good idea, but don't defend that idea to the extent that you're missing obvious things that might cause you to need to modify that idea. And there are a lot of people who come to Costa Rica with an idea, and they start something and they fail because they're so focused on their idea, then they may not be aware that someone is doing that same idea and has done it well right next door, and that's not a good environment for competition. So make sure that you challenge your ideas and that you have people who are already existing in the space challenge your ideas, because a good idea can survive the scrutiny of what's actually happening in a space. And if your idea can't survived that, thank God, because that wasn't the right thing, and better that you know before you put out $500,000 in 2 years of your life. You'll have another idea. If you had one, you'll have another idea. Find the idea that survives the scrutiny, and that's the idea where you want to put your energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. No, that's solid. Tell listeners where they can find out about Airborne Arts,
Sure.
what you're doing, where can they find you online?
Yeah, it's easy. So you just put in www.airbornearts.com. Airborne has an E at the end, so it's AIRBORNE, arts as it's normally spelled. We're in Costa Rica above the beach of Dominical. And usually we're open most of the year. This year we're going to be sort of closed between August and December. And the high season is really like December, January, February, March, April. And yeah, you can go to our website and see all the different events that are going on, or just stop by and take a flying trapeze class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool deal. And just before we go, I want to plug your, you are looking for coaches. You're looking to train someone to help spread the magic. So tell us a little bit about what kind of person that you'd be interested getting a call from or an email.
Great. So there's a couple of teams that we are looking to build. One is to help us run events, and the other is to help run on the flying trapeze. They're going to have similar personalities probably, but some of the things that are going to be really important is that communication skills have to be really, really high, and you have to be the kind of person that understands that, not having conflict is not the answer. Having conflict with the intention of getting back to understanding is the answer. And your sense of milieu has to be very high. So if you haven't been complimented on your ability to keep a space beautiful and clean, probably you're not the kind of person that should be doing this kind of work. Like if people aren't just falling over themselves for your space, right? Organizational skills, obviously. And also you have to have like a personal sort of thread of why are you doing this? Because if you're coming here because you want to be in a cool place doing cool stuff, that's not enough. If you're coming here to make money, well, that definitely is not enough. If you're coming here because you're looking for an opportunity to challenge your understandings about how you're going to do your best work in the world and have that refined through experience, you're probably the right kind of person. Yeah.
And you're looking for people that specifically have aerial trapeze skills, or is there kind of open to training people? Or
I am definitely open to training people. You just need to be aware that there's like 1 or 2 aerial jobs that you can learn in a month, but most jobs on the flying trapeze, to become good at them and to actually become a value to the team, can take anywhere from 1 year to 2 years just to get basically good at it. So if you wanted to work on the aerial or trapeze team and you came in with basic skills already, that would be a big plus for sure. Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Happy trails on your adventure coming up.
Okay.
And great to be in touch.
Cool. Thank you so much, man.